Welcome to The Definitive Wrap, where we report the truth about American exceptionalism. We love our flag, we love our country, and we believe in America. The Definitive Wrap, where we respect people of faith, the men and women in blue, and our support for Israel. And now your hosts, Bela Sebro, she's the nice one, and Alan Skorsky. He's not so nice. But together they are The Definitive Wrap.
I'm Alan Skorsky with my co-host Bela Sebro, and welcome to The Definitive Wrap, where we discuss the news items the mainstream media just won't touch. The Definitive Wrap is proud to be the official podcast of VinNews.com. Before I begin, I'm just warning all of you that my opening monologue today is me ranting. So, thank God we have with us today the Jerusalem Post's award-winning journalist, Ruthie Blum, who will tell me either you're crazy, you're a little crazy, or you're somewhere in the middle. As I have been saying for years, if you truly support Israel, it does not matter who the U.S. president is or who the prime minister of Israel. We support Israel regardless. But as we speak today, the new government coalition of the Israeli right, centrists, and the anti-Zionist Arab parties have yet to become official. Allow me to give our audience a life lesson. Anything that is done, whether it is politics, business, or personal relationships, where hatred is the motivating factor, is doomed to fail. This isn't wishful thinking on my part, it is reality. Love him or hate him, or maybe just tired of him, Bibi Netanyahu has been the longest serving prime minister in Israel's history. First elected in 1996, following the disastrous Oslo Accords, was the first time that we saw a shift from the Democrats to destabilize an Israeli government. In his book, The Missing Piece, Dennis Ross wrote extensively how the Clinton administration did everything in their power to prevent a Bibi victory, which included promising to release Jonathan Pollard to help Shimon Peres get elected. During Bibi's first term, Clinton's team, which included Rahm Emmanuel, Martin Indyk, Jeremy Ben-Ami, and other Jewish leftists, ignored all of Yasser Arafat's violations of the Oslo Accords while doing everything to frustrate Netanyahu's government. This anti-Bibi movement in the Democrat Party continued throughout the Obama administration. In Israel, there are many reasons why Bibi struggled to put together a coalition in 4 elections over a 2-year period. As much as Bibi succeeded in building up Israel on the world stage, he, like any man and any politician, has his shortcomings, and his undoing was probably self-inflicted. What we now have is a pre-engagement proposition between parties who have nothing in common with each other, and in any other election would be telling voters how dangerous the parties are. The only thing that unites them today is their hatred for Bibi. My rant is over. Bela?
Thank you, Alan. Benjamin Netanyahu possesses a unique understanding of the U.S. politics and culture like no other previous Israel leader. He was popular among politicians and voters. That's just what it was. He understood the American political climate, and he had the mental power and perception that he knew how to talk to Americans that would ultimately give clarity to U.S. leaders about Israel's position. Netanyahu even knew how to stand up to leaders of the U.S. when it was necessary. And he proved that when he spoke in a 2015 speech that he gave to a joint session of Congress. He spent his teen years in the U.S. and achieved higher education at MIT. In addition to his intellect and personality, he knows the lingo. He knows what's important and how to speak to politicians and to the average a citizen for successful interpersonal relations, and which is also so critical for the U.S. and Israel relations. And the possibility that a new leadership with less experience may be sworn in can directly affect Israel's important relationship with the United States. Additionally, there's concern with regards to dealing with Iran that's on people's minds right now. Netanyahu understood all the elements of the Iran issue in various aspects, particularly with Arab countries. And this is an issue of contention. This is an issue of contention with the United States engaging in appeasing Iran. This political transition comes during heightened tensions after weeks of clashes between Palestinian protesters and Israeli police in Jerusalem, which ignited violence in Israeli cities and triggered the 11-day Gaza war. With us today to talk more about this issue is Ruthie Blum. Ruthie is a columnist for the Jerusalem Post and the Jewish News Syndicate. She's originally from New York City and moved to Israel in 1977 and currently resides in Tel Aviv. Ruthie is a longtime editor and writer for various publications, including the Allgemeiner. She's also a regular commentator on life in Israel and US-Israel relations. She's the author of the 2012 book, To Hell in a Handbasket, Carter, Obama, and the Arab Spring, which describes the way in which then US President Barack Obama was finishing the job of radicalizing the Middle East that former President Jimmy Carter had started. Ruthie, welcome back to our show.
Thanks, Bela.
Ruthie, do you think the Biden administration is going to be happy with this new development? And also, how will this affect the Republicans since Netanyahu was seen as adversarial to Democrats?
Look, I don't know how Biden himself is seeing this. I know that Biden's party, the Democratic Party, has become so radicalized that Israel as an issue in its entirety is problematic for the squad, for example. And therefore, I don't think that in that respect, it matters so much who the prime minister is. Furthermore, the prime minister, if indeed this government is sworn in on Sunday night, the prime minister will be Naftali Bennett, who is not only an Orthodox Jew who wears a kippah, for example, but he was always to the right of Netanyahu. So the Biden administration couldn't be happy with that. Having said that, because this government in formation in Israel is made up of every party that wanted to oust Netanyahu, it's possible that members of the administration believe that there's going to be more leeway to work with this government. I think they may be unpleasantly surprised, let's put it that way. The problem with this government, as I see it, I'm in a bind in
That's
my
what we want to know.
to this government. Why? I'm a longtime supporter of Netanyahu. I'm a member of Likud. I recently actually was asking other Likud members, in the event that Netanyahu left politics, got hit by a bus, reached the age 120, would you still vote Likud? And many hesitated in that answer. I didn't hesitate. And why didn't I? Because I don't believe in personalized politics. And the reason I belong to Likud is because that I am right-wing, secular, in some ways libertarian. I'm in the center on social issues, on the right and foreign affairs and defense. And so the Likud best represents my views. Now, Netanyahu, there's no question that he's been the greatest leader Israel's ever had. I think he's even surpassed Ben-Gurion, not only in the amount of years, but in what he's managed to accomplish in this time. Although you have to admit that Ben-Gurion was here, was in Israel for the establishment of the state. Without him, that might not have happened. So we can't deny that. But Netanyahu has done so many incredible things, and that's why I continue to support him, and I voted for him in this last election, as in the previous rounds. However, unlike many of my right-wing friends, I don't feel hysterical about this at all. They're saying this is a radical leftist government. It's not true. The important ministries are held right now, are going to be held by people on the right, except for Benny Gantz, who is defense minister, but he's already been defense minister. He's already defense minister. We have a justice minister who's a former Likud party, one who wanted to oust Netanyahu, but he's on the right. We have the same goes for the justice minister, the interior minister, the education minister. Education is extremely important, because had education fallen to a left-wing minister, it would have been very bad. I know I raised 4 children in Israel with left-wing education ministers. And let me tell you, during the Oslo Accords and things like that, my children were learning in school how to paint Palestinian flags, okay? So the education ministry is extremely important. The left-wing members of this government have ministries that I don't see what the problem with it are. For example, health. Now the health, we have socialized medicine in Israel. So if a socialist is heading it, I don't care. Let him run with it as far as I'm concerned. What I'm saying is that I'm not feeling terrified about this. There is one issue that's very, very serious, and that's the Ra'am Party, the Arab Islamist party that's part of this government. Why is that an issue? Because in the coalition agreements, Rahm forced the other partners to sign an agreement that for the next few years, or I forget, 2 years or something like that, or 4 years, that the government would not touch illegal Arab construction, illegal Palestinian construction in Area C, or deal with the crisis in the Negev. Now, here's the irony. Netanyahu has been prime minister for 12 years, and he didn't take care of that. He didn't do anything to tackle illegal construction or the Negev. So the only difference between them is one believes it should be tackled and the other doesn't want it to be. But I don't see that our lives are going to change dramatically at all. There's one issue, though, that could and probably will topple this government. And that is another war or operation in Gaza. We saw that right as this war started, Mansour Abbas, the head of the Ra'am Party, who was in negotiations to join or support a coalition, said, "Oops, sorry, I'm out of here. I'm postponing it, don't want to talk." Why? Because he was siding with Hamas.
Right.
So here is our issue. Our issue is what is going to happen when there's a crucial vote in this government, in the cabinet, and how that will affect whether the government falls. I believed that we were going to have a 5th round of elections one way or the other, either because a government wouldn't be formed or because this one would collapse. It's on a very thin majority here, and that means that any one member could topple it. And, we've seen in Israeli politics that happens. And so I'm not really worried. If it falls, I'm not worried. And if it succeeds let's say, in the way that I'm imagining, then I'm not worried either.
Right. But we know that Israel's left hates Netanyahu. So can you explain to our audience why some right-wingers hate him as much too?
Yeah. Well, as Alan mentioned before, partly it has to do with Netanyahu's character flaws. As all great leaders, he's got megalomania on the one hand, and he also has not been great to his friends, his close associates. In the past, you have to understand that Naftali Bennett, Avigdor Lieberman, who's going to be the finance minister, by the way, and Gideon Sa'ar, all 3 of those were close confidants of Netanyahu's, and they ended up hating him. Okay, then that was personal. It's personal, and he hated them. Let's be honest here. This isn't just one-sided. So on the one hand, it's personal, and on the other, there is a feeling, including within Likud, which explained why Gideon Sa'ar pulled this move and left Likud, that somebody else, he's got to cultivate a successor within his own party and not squash anybody who might be that successor. So there's a problem right there. Now, aside from that, let's face it, even people who love Netanyahu, there is such a thing, most leaders don't lead that long in democracies. I mean, most don't, even the greatest ones, and even the really great ones in history are long dead. So the idea that somehow Israeli democracy or Israeli survival or flourishing is dependent on one guy that idea is both wrong and false. Israel, I believe in Israel. I say this about America too when Biden won. I supported Trump, but I refuse to join in that choir on both sides that says everybody's a danger to democracy and it's all finished. If you believe that, then you don't have faith in your country. So what's the point of holding, as Alan has, an American flag and an Israeli flag? If those two flags are dependent on one guy or another, then you might as well take the flags down.
Right. Okay. So now that my rant is over and now we're going to go into therapy mode. Okay.
I was wondering when that's going to come out,
Okay, so
Go for it.
Okay, I'm 58 and you and Bela are in your mid-20s. Okay.
Yeah.
So I remember when I was in college and Bibi was the Israeli ambassador to both the UN and US. And he was on Nightline almost every night with Ted Koppel. And I cannot tell you how many college women would come over to me, not just because I'm cute, but they knew I was politically active. And they said, oh my God, Alan, Netanyahu, he's gorgeous, he's smart, I'm going to become pro-Israel because of him. So he did so much good for Israel. And it pains me. And again, and I know that nobody lasts forever. And you're right, he made mistakes. He should have cultivated people to come after him. He has special gifts that can't be duplicated. It pains me that he has done so much harm to himself, like Donald Trump, who did so many great things. Newt Gingrich once said, Donald Trump often says the right thing, but then goes about 10% too far. And this is, I think, what Bibi has done to himself. It didn't have to go this way. Okay, so now that we've gotten that part out of the way, I can live with,
true.
I can live with a Bennett, prime ministership. He's a conservative. I like him. Again, he doesn't have Bibi's gifts, but who does? That's fine. What are you hearing?
You know what gift he does have? He knows how to make buckets of money. That he knows.
That part I read.
Exits, high-tech exits. And by the way, his English is practically flawless, as in Netanyahu's, because Bennett has American parents.
Right.
Could be worse. It could be worse.
No, listen, Bennett, he'll be okay. What are you hearing, or what do you know, from the Ra'am Party? And I forgot her name. It was one of the Arab women from the Arab list who I remember in previous years, they were talking about throwing her out because she was really venomously and vitriolically anti-Israel. Is she part of that coalition? And then how are the Arab streets reacting to this Ra'am Party? Are they calling them traitors for joining, or are they saying, or like rubbing their hands, okay, we conned them, now we got our foot in, much like we have the squad here in America, who just 2 years ago were just considered four voices, and now you see that they're a lot more than four voices. Is this what Ra'am is planning, and is Mahmoud Abbas behind the scenes saying, perfect, we got our foot in the door now?
Well, it's a good question. During the campaign, Mansour Abbas, the head of the Ra'am Party, as distinct from Mahmoud Abbas, who's the head of the Palestinian Authority, Mansour Abbas did something that gained him more enemies than friends among the radical Arabs, including the ones in his own Muslim Brotherhood associated bloc or party. Right. What he did was he said, we need to be part of the conversation in Israel as citizens of Israel, because our neighborhoods, our communities are filled with violence, poverty. We're too busy focused on the Palestinian issue and not on our own communities. So those Arabs who voted for him, actually, I think, we're not saying, let's get a foot in the door in order to destroy Israel. I think they were saying, let's get a foot in the door because we're shooting ourselves in the foot here. Many, Arab citizens of Israel are suffering from the incredible violence in their neighborhoods. Listen, it's a similar, in one respect, it's similar to ghetto blacks in, let's say, in inner cities, where you can have most of the population is afraid to go outside so they won't get caught in some crossfire of gunshots. Most of them are not drug addicts, criminals, and all that, but they cannot do anything about it. So Mansour Abbas's voters, I think, were happy to finally have somebody want to represent them. The Arab leaders in the joint list don't care about their constituents. All they care about is destroying Israel, siding with the Palestinians. Okay, that's on one hand. On the other hand, you're right. Once he did get his foot in the door, there is that danger that, he will use that platform to do harm. But I think the harm will not come from within in this case. I think it's not that he's going to try to, that he's lying about the Arab communities. But as I said, when there's a conflict that arises that Israel needs to conduct military operations, how is he going to possibly support that? There is where there's a danger, I think, more than initially he wants budgets, he wants to do stuff for his community, just the way the Haredim did for their communities. That's what he wants. He wants money, and he wants to take care of that. So we'll see. You have to understand, this is a guy who during his campaign had to have bodyguards against the radical Arabs who thought he was being a traitor.
Right.
So, he's walking a delicate tightrope. I'm not a supporter of his, but the only question I want to know is he gonna try to prevent, for example, all our covert operations against Iran in Syria, things like that. That's what's relevant here.
Right. Ruthie, the Biden administration wants to put pressure on Israelis towards a two-state solution. What do you think will happen? Will a new Israeli leadership give in?
Doesn't matter. First of all, they might. I don't know. Okay, if this government lasts, it's really hard to say, because that's one issue about which, you understand the Israeli public, why is it so right-wing? Why is the majority of the public right-wing on these issues? Is because time and time again, Israel has made concessions in order to achieve peace with the Palestinians. There's the Oslo Accords and the Y plantation agreements, and there's one thing after the other: withdrawal from Gaza, withdrawal from parts of Judea and Samaria. And all that does is encourage more terrorism, because the Palestinian Authority leadership is not interested in statehood. Mahmoud Abbas would have zero relevance. All these years, he would have had zero relevance in the international community the minute he had a state.
Right.
They're not interested in a state. They're interested in destroying the Jewish state, not in creating a state for themselves. So this is why it's failed. And it doesn't matter what Biden wants or the squad wants, or even the left-wing side of this government wants. It's not happening. It hasn't happened. Listen, Ehud Olmert wanted to hand over to Mahmoud Abbas everything.
Right.
And he didn't even answer his phone call. Ehud Barak sat said, here, take the country. And that sparked the second intifada, suicide bombing wars.
Right.
So it's not happening. It's you could say a two-state solution. It's a lie. It's not happening. So
another thing, you know what? And I tend to agree with you, because as we all know, as long as there's no two states, the billions of dollars to Abbas's pockets keep getting filled. Once there's a state, then he has to become responsible for it, and he doesn't want it. Let me go back to Mansour Abbas, because I don't know again how all the how the coalition parties work. Do they have, when there's a meeting with the Israeli cabinet, like you said, if they have to plan an operation, is his party invited? Do they get to participate in those meetings? Will he be privy to intelligence if and when Israel has to conduct operations?
That's a good question. I don't actually know the full answer to that, or what level of intelligence they'll be privy to. But yes, as a member, listen, that's what it means to be a member of the coalition. It means that you get ministers or deputy ministers it means you're not just a Knesset member. I mean, he was already a Knesset member. We've had Arab Knesset members forever. That's not, so yes, he would be. To what extent, I don't know. And so, you know, these are the questions. We don't know what's going to happen with that. And then the other question is, will Naftali Bennett, Gidon Sar, Ifat Shasha Biton, who is going to be the education minister, there are a number of former Likud and right-wing people in that government. Will they cave to the left side of this government, to the left half, or not? Now, all of Naftali Bennett's enemies now, those include Bibi supporters, and they include some Yamina voters also, believe that are calling him a liar and that he's a traitor and he's a this and that. I hate that language because really, you know, what he did was manipulate the system in a legal way. I've been saying we should change this system since day one. And as soon as someone manipulates this cockamamie system to his benefits, suddenly the others are screaming. Okay, it's the system. He didn't do anything wrong. He wanted to be prime minister, and he said all along that he wants to replace Netanyahu. Where's the lie there? The other promises he made that he broke, so did Netanyahu, so did everybody else break promises. Question is he really a liar? Is he really, suddenly he changed stripes and has become a big leftist? Right. I don't think so. I mean, so then the question is, yeah, but in order to hold on to power, how far will he go not to make waves? I don't know. I don't know. I hope as I said, I don't give this government long to live anyway. Right. And sadly, it only came into being to get rid of Netanyahu. And then they all basically, there's no question that they all sort of behind closed doors said, look, we all hate each other, but look, let's get together, we'll kick him out, and then we'll worry about it. Then we'll have elections, he'll be out of the way. Right. You know, they didn't even hide this. I mean, this is not something it's not my theory. They said so without hesitation.
Ruthie, I follow you on social media, and this was discussed on one of your pages. People have been in shock that the Los Angeles Teachers Union adopted the Arab narrative of the decision, calling for U.S. government to stop providing economic aid to the state of Israel. Is this a sign of the times?
Why were they shocked? Teachers unions forever have been vile, disgusting, radical, self-serving. I mean, I have no good word to say about teachers unions, including not in Israel, by the way. Okay, so let's get that.
In the U.S., people were in shock. That's for sure.
And I mean, yeah, but why were they in shock? When did teachers unions ever serve a higher purpose? Teachers unions, let me tell you, they and if you even leave out the politics of Palestinians and all that, they took advantage of the coronavirus pandemic to collect money and not teach and yammer, and they don't want to go back to teaching. You know, the point is, I just don't understand what's the surprise, okay, that they're radical, and also they're in California. I mean, let's face it, New York and California, you're surprised when it's the teachers unions do anything that's a radical leftist position? I'm not.
Yeah. So, let me ask you two things. By the way, unions consider themselves to be part of the aggrieved coalition. So the aggrieved coalition, they're all uniting. Yeah. Again, this is Linda Sarsour. When George Floyd was killed by the police, all of a sudden there were murals of him with a keffiyeh around his neck. Yeah. And the black community bought right. It said, yeah, those Jews, because the American cops were trained by the Israeli police how to oppress blacks. So I'm not surprised about that. Let me go back to Israel. Naftali Bennett, I think about 6 or 7 seats. Do you know the makeup between all the parties combined, how much of it is center right versus how much is center left? Because even if Naftali got 6 seats, if between him and the other right-wing parties, does the right still control more seats than the left?
No, I think they tried to make it, tried to make it even in order to get these coalition deals signed. What's more, there are tons of ministers here. They had to just, there's a huge proportion of ministers to the number of seats. Okay.
Right.
There's like 26, I may be getting this wrong. I don't know, 26 ministers to, 60 seats or something like, I mean, it's almost as though almost every one of them is going to get a big job.
Yeah.
But that's not the issue. The issue is who caves to whom. That's the question, not how many there are.
Right. Now,
ironically, as many disgruntled Israelis have pointed out, the public is on the right. Okay. Right. The public is on the right. So that's why many felt as though somehow their votes were stolen and manipulated. Right. But that's this ridiculous system, and that's what enabled it, is this system. Okay. Also seriously, I can't when friends of mine are saying, look at this radical leftist government. I'm sorry. You want to criticize Bennett? You want to criticize Saar and Lieberman? Listen, there's plenty of criticism, but to call them radical leftists is a little ridiculous. Lieberman, for example, do you know what he said he's going to do first as finance minister? Something that is incredibly unpopular on the left. He's a big capitalist. He's going to slash, he said, no more, he's going to cut the coronavirus dole, all the people who were laid off. Anybody under the age of 45 starting next week, cut off. Now, that's not a leftist policy, let me tell you.
Yeah,
nor is he, and he also announced that he's not going to raise taxes. Now, he may not do this. Okay, I only know what he's saying. But believe me, you got to be very brave in Israel to say such a thing.
Yeah, listen, here in America.
Okay. That's not a radical leftist position to cut people off of the government dole. It just isn't.
Right.
So there are many things you can say about Lieberman, and there are many things you can say about all of them. But let's be accurate. To call them radical leftists when they're not is inaccurate.
Right. Again, it's hyperbole, and especially on Facebook when everybody is an expert on everything.
Yeah.
Them in person, so you know how it is.
No, what you could say is, you know what? It's disgusting that they did that to Netanyahu. Fine. But, radical leftists, where do you get that?
No, when you're on Facebook and Twitter, unless you're extreme, then whatever it is. I mean, we're both there, so we see what people say.
Yeah.
Ruthie, we're running out of time. And considering everything we talked about today, I would like to touch upon an article that you wrote for the Jerusalem Post regarding your message for President-elect Isaac Herzog, and how he has his work cut out for him. Please share your viewpoint with our listening and viewing audience.
Okay, so let me begin by saying I think the presidency is completely ridiculous and we don't need it. So I would abolish that office altogether. It's much more of a symbolic office. But because it's much more of a symbolic office, every time there's a president, he wants to make his mark, he ends up being more political than he's supposed to be. Now, and that's true of all of them, almost all of them anyway. I have been enraged at the current president, Reuven Rivlin, for a number of things, but the most important of which was not in this column, and that is his removing the particularity of the Holocaust by having Zoom conference on Holocaust Memorial Day with Austria and Germany, talking about all racism is bad, all genocide is bad. No, the president of the Jewish state on Holocaust Remembrance Day, his job is to say anti-Semitism is particular. The Holocaust is particular. This isn't all racism, and especially not with your Austrian and German counterparts. So we'll start with that, but that's been typical. He has spent his presidency suddenly, and he was also in Netanyahu's party, Likud, spent the presidency continuously saying, Israelis, we need to do soul searching so that we don't become like our enemies are accusing us of. And I find that horrifying. We don't need soul searching. Let me tell you something, compared to the rest of the world, we got our morals are pretty great.
Yeah.
And so is our army's morals and everything. As compared to what? Why do we have to do soul searching? Why? Because we have some violent people? Of course, the question isn't whether you have violent extremists in your society. The question is how they're treated. And in Israel, they're put in jail. If they're criminals, they're put, I mean, it's insane. And so I was enraged with him every time he opened his mouth. I don't want to be told on Memorial Day that we need to do soul searching. And so I was happy to see him go. And so the purpose of that column really was to say, was like a warning to Herzog, do me a favor. Don't follow in his footsteps. Do something different. And Herzog, by the way, as the head of the Jewish agency, he's been very sort of a unifying figure, the diaspora and Israel and all that.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping he won't enter the office. His father, by the way, Chaim Herzog, was a president of Israel, and he was also an ambassador to the UN, an illustrious figure. And they're all Labor Party people. But all I'm hoping is that Herzog will not give the public lectures on how to soul search. He wants to do his own soul searching. Let him.
Right.
Ruthie, thank you for joining us on the Definitive Wrap. Thank you to our audience.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, please, are you kidding? We couldn't wait to have you again, and we invite you here and now to join us again.
This was.
Thank you to our listening
And
audience for
thank you
tuning
too.
in, and to vinnews.com for our show being their official podcast.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Shalom.
Thanks for listening to The Definitive Wrap with your hosts, Bela Sebro and Alan Skorsky. Be sure to tell your family and friends they also can listen to The Definitive Wrap on Apple Music, Spotify, Google Play, and your favorite streaming service. See you next time on The Definitive Wrap.